He's not even good enough to be a janitor." The voice of my mother echoed through the elegant executive office of Harrison and Associates, one of the largest corporate law firms in the United States. "My son is a complete failure who can't even pay his own bills." I stood in the doorway of the conference room, watching Margaret Hayes gesticulate dramatically to three men in impeccable suits sitting around the mahogany table. She had gotten past security by claiming to be my mother and saying she needed to talk to the manager about the inappropriate behavior of employee Nathan Hayes. "He lives in that tiny apartment downtown, drives a 10-year-old car, and has worn the same clothes for years," she continued, pointing in his direction as if I were evidence of failure. "You should fire him immediately before he causes serious trouble for this reputable company." My name is Nathan Hayes. I am 37 years old, and at that moment, I was watching my own mother try to destroy my career in front of people she assumed were her superiors. What she didn't know was that I had known every one of those people for over a decade. The gray-haired man on the left was Thomas Chun, founding partner of the firm and my mentor since law school. Next to his was David Morrison, the top corporate client I had represented in dozens of multi-million-dollar cases. And at the head of the table, watching the scene with an expression of growing disbelief, was Robert Harrison III, the company's CEO. "Ms. Hayes," Robert finally interrupted, her voice carrying that tone of authority I knew well from our weekly meetings. "I think there's a misunderstanding here." My mother straightened up, clearly pleased to have the attention of what she believed to be her boss. "There is no misunderstanding, sir. I know my son better than anyone. He's always been lazy, irresponsible, and—" "Mom." Her voice cut through the air with a calmness that only 15 years in court can teach. "I don't think you understand where you are. For the past 8 years, I've kept her professional life completely separate from her family life. Not out of shame or arrogance, but because I grew up in a family where success was measured by ostentation, where personal value depended on how much money he spent on cars and designer clothes. I chose to live modestly, invest his money wisely, and keep his feet on the ground. The result of that choice was now staring back at me with growing horror as reality began to dawn on her." Thomas Chun rose slowly, his expression changing from confusion to something close to amusement. "Ms. Hayes, allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Thomas Chun, founding partner of this firm. And this young man you're trying to fire," he paused, clearly relishing the moment, "is Nathan Hayes, our managing partner and one of the most respected lawyers in the country." The silence that followed was so deep that I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My mother looked from Thomas to me, then to Robert, his face going through a whole range of emotions: confusion, denial, and finally, a mortifying realization. If this family history and unexpected twists and turns are grabbing her attention, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple attempt at humiliation turned into the most embarrassing revelation of a mother's life. But what my mother didn't know yet was that this conversation was being recorded for the company's archives, and that every word she had said would be revisited in a way she could never have imagined. "That's impossible," my mother murmured, her voice losing all the authority it had had seconds before. "Nathan never told her he was. He can't be." Robert Harrison rose from his chair, her imposing height dominating the room. "Mrs. Hayes, her son is not just a managing partner at this firm. He is the lawyer responsible for the biggest corporate cases in the country. Last week, he closed a $300 million deal that saved 12,000 jobs." I watched my mother process this information, seeing decades of prejudices and assumptions crumble in real time. Margaret Hayes, 62 years old, a woman who had always measured success by the number of zeros in her bank account and the social status she could flaunt. For her, human value was directly proportional to the size of one's house, the model of one's car, and the labels on one's clothes. "But he drives that old Honda," she stammered, pointing at me as if I were contradictory evidence. "And that tiny apartment. He never has money for anything." Thomas Chun chuckled softly, a sound I recognized from our legal strategy sessions when we found a crucial flaw in the opposition's argument. "Mrs. Hayes, Nathan owns the penthouse of the Manchester building. It's 4,000 square feet with a view of the river. He also has a country house in Martha's Vineyard and, if I'm not mistaken, an apartment in London." The color drained completely from my mother's face. For years, she had criticized me at family gatherings, constantly comparing me to her younger brother, Kevin, who worked in real estate sales and drove a BMW he borrowed from the dealer to impress clients. Kevin, whom she always introduced as my successful son, while describing me as the one who's still trying to find himself. Nathan, David Morrison addressed me with the respect our 10-year professional partnership had built. Perhaps you can explain to her why you chose to keep your position private. I approached the conference table, my hands clasped behind my back in a posture I had developed over thousands of hours in court. Mom, for the past 8 years, every time you asked me about my job, I told you I worked in corporate law. You never showed any interest in knowing more. But you never said you were, she gestured vaguely toward the men in their expensive suits. A partner? One of the youngest lawyers to reach that position in the history of the firm? The one responsible for setting legal precedents that are studied at Harvard and Yale. My voice maintained the professional tone I used with difficult clients. You're right, Mom. I never said that explicitly. What she didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that my decision to live modestly wasn't a financial one. It was philosophical. I had grown up watching how money turned people into worse versions of themselves, how social status created artificial hierarchies that destroyed genuine relationships. Nathan, Thomas interjected gently, her mother seems confused about her financial situation. I smiled, the same controlled smile I wore when I was about to present devastating evidence in court. Mom, remember when she complained that I couldn't contribute $500 to Dad's birthday present last year? She nodded quickly, clearly remembering how she had humiliated me in front of the entire family, saying I was financially irresponsible and that Kevin had covered my share as usual. That same day, I transferred $2 million to a college scholarship fund in Dad's name. The difference is that he never knew because I didn't want anyone to feel obligated to thank me or treat him differently. $2 million. My mother repeated weakly. And that was just January, David added with a smile. Nathan funds education for underprivileged children, rehabilitation programs for ex-convicts, and maintains a free legal clinic that serves 1,000 families a month. Margaret Hayes slumped into a chair, her initial bravado completely evaporated. For decades, she had measured my worth based on superficial appearances, assuming that modesty meant failure, that humility indicated a lack of ambition. But what she didn't know was that this entire conversation was being recorded. Not just for the company archives, as I mentioned earlier, but because Robert had secretly initiated a video call with other founding partners who were listening to every word of our emergency meeting. And among those partners was someone my mother knew very well. Someone whose opinion she valued above anything else in the world. Someone who was about to turn this awkward situation into something far more complex and painful than she could ever imagine. Nathan is right about the foundation, a familiar voice echoed through the speakers of the room's video conferencing system. I was very moved when I heard that my brother had created that scholarship in our father's name. My mother quickly turned to the large screen on the wall, where the smiling face of Kevin Hayes, my younger brother, appeared. The same Kevin that she always introduced as the successful son at family gatherings. Kevin, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. What are you doing there? Attending the monthly meeting of the founding partners, he replied calmly. Mom, meet the other founders of Hayes and Morrison Enterprises, the financial technology company we started together 3 years ago. For years, she had used Kevin as a yardstick for my supposed failure, never asking for details about how he had managed to start his own business at such a young age, where the initial capital had come from, or why he always avoided talking about his silent investors. Wait, she stammered, looking from Kevin on the screen to me. You two are partners? Thomas Chun stood up and walked over to a digital presentation on the wall. With a few taps, he revealed a complex organizational chart showing the corporate structure of Hayes and Morrison. Mrs. Hayes, her son Nathan, is not just a managing partner at this law firm. He is the lead investor and legal advisor to 17 technology companies, including his son's company. 17 companies? My mother seemed to be having trouble processing the information. Actually, it's 19 now, Kevin corrected from the screen. Nathan just invested in 2 clean energy startups last week. Mom, did you really think he raised $2 million in seed funding by selling real estate? I watched my mother confront decades of false assumptions in real time. Kevin had always been smart enough to let her believe that his success came entirely from his own talent, while I had provided not only the initial capital but also all the legal support to properly structure the business. But Nathan never said, she began weakly. Because you never asked, I interrupted, my voice maintaining the professional tone I had developed after years of mediating complex corporate disputes. Mom, in the last 15 family meetings, how many times have you specifically asked him about his work other than how are things at the office? She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Robert Harrison resumed control of the presentation, revealing a series of newspaper articles and professional accolades. Ms. Hayes, his son was named Lawyer of the Year by the American Bar Association in 2021. He received the Innovation in Corporate Law Award from the Harvard Law Review last year. And he's been on Forbes' list of the 40 most influential professionals under 40 for 3 years in a row. Forbes, she repeated mechanically. Page 47 of the March issue, David Morrison added with a smile. There's a really good photo of Nathan in court, representing a clean technology company against an oil company. The case set important precedents for environmental protection. I could see my mother doing mental calculations, trying to reconcile the man she had just called useless with these revelations. For years, she had measured success by ostentation, expensive cars, designer clothes, houses in the most exclusive areas of the city. She interpreted my deliberate modesty as evidence of failure, never considering that someone might choose to live humbly despite having abundant resources. Nathan, Kevin said from the screen, his voice carrying a note of sadness I recognized from our private conversations with she, maybe it's time to show her the home office. I grabbed my phone and opened the app that controlled my apartment security. With a few taps, I activated the internal camera system. The meeting room screen showed a panoramic view of my home office, floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookcases filled with volumes of case law, an executive desk that had belonged to a Supreme Court justice, and on the walls, diplomas, certifications, and photographs of me with 3 different governors, 2 senators, and the Attorney General of the United States. This is just the office, I said casually. The law library is upstairs. Margaret Hayes was staring at the screen as if she were seeing a ghost. Nathan, I didn't know. Mom, my voice took on the tone I used with hostile witnesses. You've spent the last 15 minutes trying to destroy his professional reputation in front of colleagues who respect him. You've claimed that he's irresponsible, lazy, and possibly involved in illegal activities. All without ever asking a single genuine question about his life. Thomas Chun resumed his seat at the table. Nathan, perhaps your mother would like to hear about her contribution to the reform of the juvenile justice system? Or the mentoring program you created for young lawyers from low-income families, David Morrison added. Don't forget the free legal clinic, Kevin contributed from the screen. Mom, Nathan provides free legal services to families who can't afford a lawyer. Last year alone, he saved 432 families from eviction. Why didn't you ever tell us? She finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. I sat down in the chair across from her, interlacing my fingers the same way I did when I was about to present a crucial argument in court. Because I wanted to see if his family would love me for who I am, not for what I've achieved. I wanted to find out if my mother would be proud of the son she raised, regardless of titles or public recognition. I stood up slowly and walked over to the window, which offered a panoramic view of the city. I found out that you were willing to try to destroy his career based on prejudice and assumptions. I found out that you were never genuinely curious about my life or his values. And I found out that you were willing to publicly humiliate someone you claim to love. I turned to face her directly. But most of all, Mom, I've discovered that I need to make a very important decision about the future of our relationship. Kevin discreetly disconnected from the video call, recognizing that the rest of this conversation should be private. Thomas, Robert, and David also began to get up, but I raised my hand to stop them. No, please stay, I said calmly. What I have to say to his mother must be witnessed. Because this time, I want it to be absolutely clear to everyone where I stand. What my mother didn't know was that this conversation wasn't just being recorded for the company archives. It was being broadcast live to a business leadership webinar that I had agreed to present to 200 executives. A webinar on family integrity in the corporate environment that was about to become much more personal than anyone could have imagined. And the decision I was about to announce would change not only our family relationship, but also the trajectory of our entire business legacy for generations to come. Nathan, you can't be serious, my mother, his mother, stood abruptly from her chair, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used when trying to control situations that were slipping out of her grasp. You're creating unnecessary drama. I came here worried about you, trying to protect her reputation. Thomas Chen coughed discreetly, his expression revealing decades of experience observing dysfunctional family dynamics in cases of business succession. "Mrs. Hayes, perhaps it would be best to hear what Nathan has to say." But my mother had gone into full attack mode, the same strategy she used when she felt cornered in any situation. "Protect? You spent 15 minutes trying to fire me from a job that, as we now discover, doesn't even exist at his level of the hierarchy." My voice maintained the professional calm I had developed over thousands of hours mediating explosive corporate conflicts. "You didn't come here worried about me, Mom. You came here because Kevin casually mentioned that I work in law, and you decided to investigate whether you could benefit from any professional connections." The color drained from her face. Bingo. During our last family gathering, she had asked several seemingly casual questions about his office colleagues, and whether he knew any lawyers who handled high-net-worth divorce cases. Our neighbor, Dolores Whitman, was suing her husband for adultery, and my mother had offered to get a referral through Nathan. "That's not true," she protested, but her voice no longer carried the same conviction. Robert Harrison leaned forward, her executive experience clearly recognizing the patterns of manipulative behavior he had observed in dozens of corporate family disputes. "Mrs. Hayes, Nathan mentioned that this conversation is being recorded. It is also being broadcast live to a business leadership webinar with 200 executives watching." The silence that followed was so profound that I could hear the building's ventilation system. My mother looked from Robert to me, then to the discreet camera mounted on the wall, which she had assumed was part of the standard security system. "Live broadcast," she whispered. "To 200 CEOs, executive directors, and business leaders," I confirmed calmly. "Today's topic is family integrity in the corporate environment, how personal values impact professional leadership." Her performance over the last 20 minutes serves as a perfect case study. David Morrison opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. The webinar chat was scrolling rapidly, with comments from Fortune 500 executives expressing shock, solidarity, and in many cases, recounting similar experiences with family members who didn't respect his professional values. "CEO of Morrison Tech, this reminds me of my own sister trying to use his position to get contracts." Director of Phoenix Industries, Nathan's humility is inspiring. How many executives do we know who do the opposite? President of Chun Holdings, toxic family is toxic family, regardless of professional success. My mother read a few comments, her expression changing from horror to mortifying understanding. "Nathan, did you plan this?" "I planned the webinar, yes. About maintaining authenticity and humility regardless of professional success," I replied. Her unexpected visit just provided the live example I wouldn't have had the courage to fabricate. What she didn't know, what no one knew but Kevin and he, was that this broadcast was part of a much larger strategy. For the past 6 months, I had been quietly documenting all of his family's attempts to take advantage of his position without showing any genuine interest in him as a person. The talk about getting lawyer recommendations for the neighbor. The seemingly innocent questions about whether I knew influential people who could help with my cousin's real estate business. The subtle suggestions that I should use my position to help the family. Each interaction had been carefully catalogued, not out of paranoia, but because I recognized the patterns I had observed in dozens of cases of family exploitation that had crossed his desk over the years. "Thomas," I said to my mentor, "could you explain to my mother the legal concept of conflict of interest, and why lawyers can't just give recommendations based on personal relationships?" Thomas Chen assumed his Harvard Law School professor mode. "Ms. Hayes, when a lawyer uses her professional position to benefit family members without following proper ethical procedures, it constitutes a violation of the rules of the bar. Nathan not only maintains the highest ethical standards, but also teaches these principles as a guest lecturer at 3 law schools." "Professor," my mother repeated mechanically. "Harvard, Yale, and Stanford," David added with a smile. "He's also writing a book on ethics in corporate law that will be published by Oxford University Press next year." I grabbed my phone and opened the folder of screenshots I had been compiling. Screenshots of family messages, emails from relatives asking for professional favors, and WhatsApp conversations where my mother discussed strategies for making better use of Nathan's connections. "Mom, do you want to see what really motivated me to keep my career private?" I slid my phone across the table. "This is a conversation you had with Aunt Linda last week, discussing how to convince me to use my influence to help Cousin Derek with his commercial zoning problem." She read the conversation, his face turning various shades of red. The most revealing message read, "Nathan has always been very strict about these ethical things, but if we push him the right way, we can get him to help. It's just a matter of using the right family language." "And this," I continued, showing another screenshot, "is you explaining to our neighbor that I probably know judges who could speed up her divorce proceedings." The webinar had become the most watched session in the platform's history. The moderator discreetly informed me via chat that there were now 1,200 people watching, including journalists specializing in business ethics. "Nathan, my mother tried one last strategy. I just wanted to help people. He's so successful," I thought, "that I should compromise his professional integrity to solve the personal problems of people who have never shown a genuine interest in who he is as a person?" I interrupted, my voice taking on the tone I used for cross-examinations. "Mom, in 15 years of my career, you've never asked me about my professional values, my legal philosophy, or why I chose to specialize in ethical corporate law." Robert Harrison stood up, clearly recognizing that the moment had come for definitive decisions. "Nathan, I believe you wanted to announce something specific to her?" I took a deep breath, remembering the hundreds of families I had seen destroyed by similar dynamics during my career. If you are following this journey of family values versus professional integrity, be sure to subscribe to the channel to see how difficult decisions shape true character. "Mom," I finally said, "for the next 6 months, you will no longer have my personal phone number, my home address, or any information about my professional life. All communication between us will go through Kevin, who will serve as a neutral intermediary." "What? Nathan, you can't. 6 months for you to reflect on whether you want a genuine relationship with your son, or if you'd rather continue trying to exploit a fantasy version of what you imagine my professional influence to be." I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door. "The choice is his, Mom. But this time, it will be an informed choice about who I really am, not who you imagine me to be." What she didn't know was that this decision wasn't impulsive. It was the result of months of consulting with Dr. Patricia Williams, one of the nation's leading experts on toxic family dynamics in high-performance professional environments. And that the next 6 months would not only be a period of reflection, but a definitive test that would determine not only the future of our family relationship, but also the foundation of the legacy he intended to build for generations to come. The real transformation was just beginning. "Wait, Nathan!" my mother shouted as I reached the door to the conference room. "You can't just— is this conversation really being broadcast?" I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and turned slowly. "To 1,400 people right now, Mom. Including journalists from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Harvard Business Review." The blood drained completely from his face. "Journalists?" Robert Harrison discreetly tapped his tablet. "Nathan, the webinar moderator is receiving requests for live interviews. CNN Business, Bloomberg, and 3 business leadership podcasts want to talk to you about family authenticity in executive positions." "And me?" my mother asked in a small voice. "Well," Thomas Chun consulted his own device, "there are a few requests for comments on toxic family dynamics in high-level corporate environments. Apparently, her performance has become an instant case study on how not to support family members in leadership positions." I watched my mother process that his attempt at humiliation had become viral content for business behavior analysis. But what she didn't know yet was that this broadcast had not been a coincidence. For the past 3 months, I had been collecting data on destructive family patterns in high-level executives for academic research. "Nathan," David Morrison stood up, "maybe it's time to explain the full project." I walked back to the conference table, picked up a folder I had strategically left in the center, and opened it. "Mom, 6 months ago, I received a proposal from Harvard Business School to lead a study on the impact of toxic family relationships on executive performance. We needed real case studies." "Case studies," she repeated mechanically. "Over the past few months, I have systematically documented every attempt you have made to exploit my professional position without showing any genuine interest in me as a person. Every recorded conversation, every archived text message, every family strategy to take advantage of Nathan's connections has been carefully cataloged." I grabbed his phone and opened a recording app. This conversation today was the perfect capstone to our research. A live example of how family members can try to destroy someone's professional reputation based on prejudice and unfounded assumptions. Thomas Chun smiled, clearly appreciating the elegance of the strategy. "Nathan, could you explain the full scope of this research to her?" Sure. I walked over to the projection screen and activated an elaborate presentation. Mom, our research involved 250 C-level executives at Fortune 500 companies. We found that 72% keep aspects of their careers private specifically to avoid family exploitation. The first slide showed devastating statistics about family relationships in high-net-worth families. 86% reported at least one incident where family members attempted to use her position for personal gain without offering genuine emotional support. "Have you been studying me, her?" my mother whispered, horror growing in her voice. "I was documenting behavioral patterns that you chose to exhibit repeatedly over the course of 8 years, I corrected calmly. "The difference is important for the research methodology." Margaret, his son, is also publishing a book on this topic. Family as a Business: Navigating Toxic Relationships in Leadership Positions will be released by Harvard University Press next fall. A book. She sat down heavily, as if her legs could no longer support her. "With an entire chapter devoted to what we're calling family parasite syndrome," I added. "Behaviors where family members attempt to extract benefits from professional positions without offering reciprocal emotional support or genuine respect for the person." David Morrison tapped his tablet. "Nathan, the webinar chat has exploded. We have 3 CEOs reporting identical experiences with their own mothers, 5 VPs sharing similar stories with siblings, and a startup founder saying her entire family tried to exploit her financially after her IPO. And there's more," I continued, watching my mother try to process the magnitude of what had happened. "This research has become the basis for a new training protocol in large corporations on how to identify and handle inappropriate family pressures." Thomas Chun opened another folder. "Margaret, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple have already implemented seminars based on his work. He literally wrote the manual on how executives should deal with family members who exhibit the behaviors you displayed today." The silence in the room was absolute, except for the soft sound of notifications coming in on everyone's devices. More media requests, more universities wanting to study our data, more companies interested in the training protocols. "But Nathan," my mother finally found her voice, "did you plan all this? Did you know I was coming here?" "I didn't plan for you to come specifically today," I replied honestly. "But I documented enough patterns to predict that you would eventually try something like this. Kevin casually mentioned last week that you had asked about my office, and if I knew important people." I grabbed my phone and showed her a series of text messages. "Kevin warned me last night that you were investigating my professional situation. That's why we activated the live stream this morning. We didn't know exactly what you would do, but we wanted to be prepared." Kevin knew. Her voice was almost inaudible now. "Kevin has been my primary consultant on this investigation for the past 6 months, I revealed. He documented his attempts to use our business partnership to impress your real estate clients, her questions about taking advantage of Nathan's connections, and her speculation about my financial life." Robert Harrison stood up, clearly recognizing that we had reached the crucial moment of revelation. "Margaret, there's one last thing you need to know about this research." "What?" she asked, looking like a lost child. "His behavior today not only confirmed our research hypotheses," he said calmly. "It also violated several corporate confidentiality agreements." "Confidentiality agreements?" Thomas Chun opened a legal document. "When you walked into this office and began making allegations about the professional competence of a managing partner to clients and business partners, you technically committed corporate defamation. Our security policies require that we treat this formally." The horror on his face was almost palpable. "Are you going to sue me?" "No," I replied calmly. "But we will use this incident as a definitive example in our corporate training protocols. Her performance today will be studied in MBA classrooms for the next 10 years as an example of what not to do." David Morrison glanced at his watch. "Nathan, we have 5 minutes before the live Q&A session. The participants want to know about recovery strategies for family relationships after incidents like this." I looked at my mother, who was sitting in absolute silence, finally realizing that she had not only been publicly humiliated, but had unwittingly become his subject of academic research on dysfunctional family behavior. "Mom," I said softly, "the question now is not whether our relationship can be repaired. The question is whether you are willing to participate in Phase 2 of our research, Family Rehabilitation Protocol for Relationships Damaged by Inappropriate Power Dynamics." "Phase 2? she whispered. 6 months of documented family therapy with Dr. Patricia Williams, followed by a year of coaching on how to support family members in leadership positions without trying to exploit those positions. I walked over to the window, watching the city stretch out below us. The choice is his, Mom. You can become a case study in permanent family failure, or you can become an example of recovery and growth. What she didn't know was that both Kevin and he had already decided that, regardless of her choice, our research was complete. And that the next 6 months would not just be about our family relationship, but about setting new standards for how families of high-level executives should interact. The most profound transformation was yet to come. 2 months later, I received an email from Harvard Business School. Our webinar had become the most watched in the platform's history, with over 200,000 views and requests from universities around the world to use our research in their MBA curricula. Nathan, Dr. Patricia Williams, called me on a Tuesday morning. Her mother has completed the first phase of family therapy. She would like to talk to you. I was reviewing contracts in my office when Margaret Hayes walked in, unrecognizable from the arrogant woman who had tried to destroy her reputation 2 months earlier. Her hair was simpler, her clothes casual, and for the first time in decades, she wasn't wearing flashy jewelry. Nathan, his voice was soft, almost a whisper. I watched the entire webinar. All 4 hours of behavioral analysis. I read the articles in the Wall Street Journal about our family. I saw the interviews you gave about toxic family dynamics. I maintained my professional demeanor but allowed her to continue. For 2 months, I participated in daily sessions with Dr. Williams. I reviewed all of our interactions over the past 8 years. And I realized something devastating about myself. Her hands trembled slightly. I never loved you for his being. Only for what I imagined he could provide me. Thomas Chun had warned me that family members in recovery often experience moments of brutal insight into their own behavior. What surprised me was the depth of my mother's self-criticism. I discovered that for 15 years, Kevin protected me from knowing details about her career because he knew I would try to exploit his position. He knows me better than I know myself. Tears began to stream down her face. My own youngest son had to protect his brother from his own mother. And what do you intend to do with this understanding? I asked, using the neutral tone I had learned in complex family mediations. I've spent the last 2 months volunteering at a free legal clinic, she replied, completely surprising me. The same clinic you anonymously fund. Dr. Williams suggested I try helping people who really need support, rather than trying to extract benefits from those who already have resources. I grabbed my phone and opened the clinic's app. There were weekly reports about a new volunteer who was helping families with basic legal documentation, translating complex forms, and organizing files. Margaret Hayes, listed as initial screening volunteer. Her supervisor said, "You're one of the most dedicated volunteers they've ever had," I said, genuinely impressed. Because I finally understand the difference between helping people and using people. Her voice grew firm. Nathan, I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to go back to the way things were. I'm here to tell you that I accept the consequences of my behavior. Robert Harrison had warned me that our research would generate international interest, but I hadn't expected it to go this far. Universities in 12 countries had already implemented our protocols in his business leadership programs. The consequences include the fact that our family history is now studied in classrooms as an example of destructive dynamics? I asked. They include that and much more. She took a deep breath. They include the fact that you lost a son whom I always admired, but never knew how to love properly. They include accepting that some damage is irreversible. And they include committing herself to ensuring that other families do not repeat the same mistakes. Kevin entered the office at that moment, as we had agreed. Mom finished the family rehabilitation program with top marks, he announced. Dr. Williams said it was one of the most complete transformations he's ever seen. And now? I asked, looking from Kevin to my mother. Now I'm continuing to work at the clinic, attending monthly maintenance sessions with Dr. Williams, and learning how to support my children without trying to control or exploit their lives. Margaret stood up. And you decide whether you want to try to build a new relationship with him, or if you'd rather just maintain a professional relationship through Kevin. I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, but was only now learning to be her mother. The transformation was genuine. I could see it in the detailed reports from the clinic, in the comments from her supervisors, in the subtle changes in his posture and language. "Mom," I finally said, "let's give it a try. But under new rules. Monthly supervised conversations for 6 months. After that, we'll evaluate again." The smile that lit up her face was unlike any expression I had seen from her before. There was no hidden agenda, subtle manipulation, or self-serving expectations. It was simply genuine joy. 3 months later, Harvard University Press confirmed that his book Family as a Business would be released simultaneously in 17 countries. My mother's story had become the most cited chapter in preliminary academic reviews. Kevin expanded his business to 5 cities, still with my legal and financial support, but now our partnership was publicly recognized. No longer a shameful secret, but a healthy family collaboration. My mother completed her first year as a volunteer at the legal clinic. Her evaluations were consistently excellent, and she had directly helped 86 families navigate complex legal systems. The relationship between us didn't go back to the way it was before, because what it was before was built on lies, assumptions, and toxic dynamics. Instead, we built something entirely new, mutual respect based on honesty, clear boundaries, and genuine support. The last time we watched a webinar together, on recovering family relationships after crises, my mom commented, "It's weird to be famous for being a negative example, but if his story helps other families not make the same mistakes, it was worth it." If this journey of family transformation and poetic justice has touched his heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about how toxic relationships can turn into authentic connections when we face the truth with courage. I've learned that family isn't about who shares your blood, but about who chooses to grow with you. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the same ones who, with hard work and genuine humility, can become our biggest supporters. The real victory wasn't humiliating my mother publicly. It was creating a path for her to become the person she always had the potential to be but never had the courage to choose.